The ground shook beneath the pounding of hooves, a low rumble that grew until the horizon bloomed with riders. 200 Apache warriors, their faces painted, their lances catching the dying light. At their head rode a man draped in eagle feathers, his eyes locked on the small farmhouse. Tom Callahan froze on the barn steps, every instinct telling him to grab his rifle until he saw his daughter Anna in the doorway, holding the very blanket she'd given a dying Apache 2 days before. Follow my story to the end and comment your city so I know how far it travels. The Wyoming winter had been unkind that year, longer, harsher, and meaner than any Tom Callahan could remember. Snow clung to the earth like it meant to stay until spring forgot to come. On the third morning of February, Tom sent his 12-year-old daughter Anna to check the fence line near the western pasture. She didn't make it that far. Half a mile from the barn, she found the tracks, 2 sets of boot prints, and a trail of dark stains in the snow. She followed them through a stand of pines until she came upon a shape slumped against a fallen log. For a moment she thought it was just another dead calf taken by wolves, but when the figure stirred she saw the truth. A young Apache man, his face pale, his lips cracked, his sides soaked with blood. He opened his eyes just enough to look at her, but no words came. His breath rattled like dry leaves in wind. Anna hesitated only a heartbeat before tugging the heavy blanket from her shoulders. She wrapped it around him, tucking the edges in tight, the way her mother used to when she was sick. "I'll get my pa," she whispered, her voice shaking in the cold air. "Don't you move." When Tom found her 15 minutes later, he stopped dead in his tracks. "Anna?" He said, his voice sharp, stepped back. His eyes stayed fixed on the man. "Apache. Trouble." "He's dying," Anna insisted. "We can't just leave him." Tom's jaw worked as he weighed the dangers. In his mind, he saw smoke on the horizon, heard the old stories of raids and ambushes. Yet here was a boy barely older than Anna, broken and bleeding in the snow. "Help me lift him," Tom muttered finally. They carried the Apache back to the barn, laying him in the loft on a bed of hay. Tom cleaned the wound as best he could with hot water and whiskey, his hands moving with the rough precision of a man who'd stitched more horses than people. The boy winced, but made no sound. When the work was done, Tom leaned back on his heels. "You understand what this means," he said to Anna. She met his eyes. "It means we did what was right." That night, Tom sat by the barn door with his rifle across his lap. The snow outside glittered in the moonlight, and every distant sound made him tense. He expected riders before morning, Apache looking for one of their own, maybe soldiers looking for an escaped prisoner. Either way, he knew it would bring danger to his doorstep. Inside, Anna checked on the wounded man every hour. Once she found his eyes open, watching her. "You'll be all right," she told him softly, though she wasn't sure it was true. He closed his eyes again, and Anna returned to her spot on the hay bale, clutching the frayed edge of her missing blanket. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the Callahan ranch, the first faint echo of hooves began to rise. The sound started as a low thump against the frozen earth, so faint Tom thought it might be the wind shaking a loose board on the barn. But as the minutes passed, it grew into a steady rhythm, hoofbeats, many of them moving as one. Tom's hands tightened on the rifle. He stepped outside into the brittle night air, scanning the tree line. Snow reflected the thin moonlight, casting everything in a cold blue glow. Out there beyond the pasture, shadows moved too large to be deer, too deliberate to be cattle. Anna appeared at the barn door behind him, pulling her coat tight. "Pa." Back inside, Tom said sharply, but she didn't move. The hoofbeats slowed, then stopped altogether. Silence pressed down heavy and unnatural. A moment later, they emerged, riders fanning out across the edge of the field. He counted fast, 20 in the first line, more behind them, and still more spilling from the tree line, until the horizon seemed to fill with them. In the center rode a man in a feathered headdress, his posture straight as an iron rod, his gaze fixed on the barn. Even from this distance, Tom felt the weight of those eyes. Anna's breath caught. "It's them," she whispered. Tom didn't need her to say who. The riders advanced at a slow, deliberate pace, snow crunching under hooves. They stopped a dozen yards from the fence, dismounting in near-perfect unison. Only the leader remained in the saddle, scanning the farmhouse, the barn, and finally settling his gaze on Tom. An older man in a wool coat stepped forward from their ranks, an interpreter, Tom guessed. His voice carried in accented English. "You have someone of ours." Tom's pulse thudded in his ears. Found him half dead in the snow. He's in my barn alive because of us. The interpreter turned to the chief, speaking quickly in Apache. The chief listened, then replied in a tone as calm as it was final. He says the interpreter translated that saving a life is a bond that cannot be broken. The girl who gave him the blanket must come with them. She belongs to his people now. Tom took a step forward, anger stiffening his spine. She's my daughter. She belongs here. The interpreter's expression didn't change. A life for a life. This is the way. Anna moved closer to her father, her hand slipping into his. Her voice was barely a whisper. Pa, I don't want to go. Tom's jaw clenched. He looked from Anna to the long line of warriors, all watching, all armed, and then back to the barn. The boy upstairs had stirred earlier alive, but not out of danger, and here was the price. What if I go in her place? Tom asked. The interpreter spoke to the chief, who considered for a long, silent moment. Finally, he shook his head. The answer came back flat. No. The debt is hers. Tom's mind raced. Any move toward the rifle now would be suicide. The warriors stood too close, too many. From the loft window, the Apache youth appeared, leaning heavily on the frame. His voice was weak, but carried enough for the chief to hear. He spoke a single sentence in their language. Whatever he said made several of the warriors glance at one another. The chief's gaze softened, not much, but enough for Tom to notice. He said something to the interpreter, who stepped forward again. You will come with us too, father of the girl, to ensure her safety. When the debt is resolved, both may return. Tom didn't like it. Every muscle in his body screamed against it. But with Anna clutching his sleeve, her eyes wide in the moonlight, he nodded once. The warriors moved quickly, leading up 2 spare horses. Tom helped Anna mount, then swung into the saddle himself. The chief wheeled his horse, and the column turned, moving in a slow, measured pace back toward the dark tree line. The ranch grew smaller behind them, its roof a lonely shadow against the snow. Tom glanced at Anna. She sat straight back, despite the cold, her jaw set the same way her mother's used to be when facing something she couldn't change. You all right? He asked quietly. She nodded, though her hands were white-knuckled on the reins. I still have the blanket, she said, pulling it tighter around her shoulders. They rode in silence after that, the only sounds the crunch of hooves and the low creak of saddle leather. Somewhere ahead, beyond the black pines, the glow of campfires flickered faintly against the night sky. Tom knew they were heading straight into the heart of whatever this was, and once they arrived, there would be no easy way out. The forest closed around them, the moonlight swallowed by towering pines and the thick weave of branches overhead. The trail was narrow, winding, the snow packed hard by countless hooves. The riders kept their formation tight, their movement so smooth it was as if they'd done this ride 1,000 times. Tom's senses stayed sharp. Every flicker of shadow, every creak of saddle leather seemed to carry weight. Anna rode ahead of him between 2 warriors, who kept their eyes forward, their hands loose but ready on the reins. She clutched the blanket around her shoulders, her breath curling white in the cold. You holding up? Tom called softly. She nodded without turning. I'm fine, Pa. Her voice was steadier than he expected, though he could see the tension in her shoulders. The wounded Apache they had rescued was slung across another horse, supported by 2 riders. He seemed barely conscious, his head lolling with the rhythm of the animal's gait. From the way the chief glanced back at him every so often, Tom guessed this man mattered more than anyone was saying. The trail widened as they descended toward a shallow valley. Smoke rose in thin streams from somewhere ahead, and faint voices carried on the wind low, rhythmic chanting. The air was warmer here, sheltered from the biting wind, and the scent of wood smoke mingled with that of roasted meat. They broke into a wide clearing lit by several fires. Dozens of shelters ringed the camp, built of hide, stretched over wooden frames. Dogs darted between the horses, barking until a sharp whistle from one of the warriors sent them skittering away. As they dismounted, Tom's boots sank into snow dampened by trampled earth. Anna slid down from her horse, and immediately the chief's gaze settled on her. He said something to the interpreter, who stepped forward. The chief's name is Elan, the man said. You will speak to him with respect. He says your daughter will face 3 trials. If she succeeds, she may return with you. If she fails, the interpreter hesitated. She stays. Tom's eyes narrowed. What kind of trials? The interpreter shrugged faintly. They will be revealed in time. Anna shifted uncomfortably, but she didn't speak. Tom crouched to meet her eye level. "We'll get through this," he murmured. "Stay sharp, do what they ask, and don't show fear." "I'm not afraid," she said, though her voice betrayed a tremor. Two women approached, one older, her hair streaked with gray, and one about Anna's age. The older woman spoke softly, and the interpreter explained they would see to Anna's needs, give her food, and a place to rest. Tom stood as they led Anna away, her small figure vanishing into the glow of the fires. He turned to Alon. "I'll stay near her." Alon shook his head. Through the interpreter, he replied, "You will stay in the guest lodge. You will see her when it is time." Tom wanted to argue, but the set of the chief's jaw made it clear the decision wasn't open for debate. Reluctantly, he allowed himself to be led to a low shelter near the edge of camp. Inside, a fire crackled, casting flickering light on the hide walls. A bowl of stew sat waiting on a wooden plate. He didn't touch it. Instead, he sat on the floor staring at the entrance, replaying every moment since they'd left the ranch. His mind kept circling back to the same truth: he was deep in their territory, surrounded and unarmed, except for the pocket knife in his coat. Somewhere in the distance, a drum began to beat slow and steady. Voices rose in song, carrying through the cold air. It was not a war chant, but something older, steadier. Tom listened, straining to hear if Anna's voice was among them. Footsteps crunched outside, and the flap lifted. The interpreter entered, his expression unreadable. "The first trial will be tomorrow at dawn. She will have the night to prepare." Tom's jaw tightened. "And if she fails?" The interpreter met his gaze without flinching. "Then the bond remains. She will live among us as one of us." When the man left, Tom leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He thought of the blanket, Anna's last connection to her mother, and of the boy they'd saved. Somehow that simple act of kindness had turned into a chain, pulling them both deeper into a world neither of them understood. Outside, the drumming stopped abruptly, and the camp fell into a heavy silence, the kind that felt less like rest and more like the pause before something big. Tom knew morning would come fast, and with it the first test. The cold bit harder in the hour before dawn. Tom was already awake when the hide flap lifted and the interpreter stepped inside. "It's time," the man said simply. Tom followed him out into the pale light. The camp was stirring, warriors stoking fires, women carrying baskets of grain, children peeking from behind shelters to catch a glimpse of the strangers. Beyond the central fire, a wide, snow-dusted corral held a single Mustang, its coat the color of storm clouds, its breath steaming in the cold. Anna stood nearby, her blanket draped around her shoulders. She looked small against the backdrop of warriors, but her eyes found Tom instantly. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded, though her hands gripped the blanket tighter. "They told me I have to ride him." She glanced toward the Mustang. "And not just ride, make him follow me." Tom's brows drew together. "That's not a small thing." Before he could say more, Elon stepped forward, speaking in low, even tones. The interpreter translated. "This is the trial of skill. The horse is wild. If she can earn its trust and ride it before sundown, the first trial is passed." Tom's gut tightened. He'd broken horses before, but it took days, sometimes weeks. "And if she doesn't?" "She fails," the interpreter said flatly. Anna took a step toward the corral, her boots crunching in the snow, the Mustang's ears flicked back, nostrils flaring. When she reached the gate, two warriors swung it open and stepped aside. Tom wanted to call out to tell her to be careful, but he held his tongue. She slipped inside, moving slowly, her gaze never leaving the horse. The Mustang danced sideways, muscles rippling under its coat. She spoke softly, not in Apache, not even in words really, but in the murmuring tone her mother used to use when calming skittish animals. The Mustang snorted, pawed at the ground, but didn't bolt. Minutes passed. The camp gathered around, murmurs rising and falling like wind in the trees. Tom's hands curled into fists at his sides. Anna took another step, then another, her blanket slipping from her shoulders and pooling in the snow. She extended a hand, palm up. The Mustang's head jerked back, then forward again. Curiosity winning over fear. When its nose brushed her fingers, Tom let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. From there, the change was slow but steady. She walked beside the Mustang in a loose circle, her hand brushing its neck. Eventually, she swung a leg over its back in one smooth motion. The Mustang tensed, but didn't throw her. By the time she rode it toward the corral gate, the murmurs had turned to approving nods. Ellen himself stepped forward, placing a hand on the Mustang's neck before looking at Anna. His words were short, but the interpreter smiled faintly. The first trial is past. Anna dismounted, cheeks flushed from the cold and the effort. She retrieved her blanket, wrapping it around herself again. Tom met her halfway, his relief hidden behind a steady nod. "You did good." "I remembered how Ma used to calm the new colts," she said quietly. "I just pretended this was one of ours." Before Tom could answer, the interpreter spoke again. "Tomorrow will be the second trial. Tonight, you rest." The warriors led the Mustang away, and the crowd began to disperse. Tom and Anna walked together toward the guest lodge, the snow crunching under their boots. As they passed the wounded Apache's shelter, Tom caught sight of him sitting outside, propped against a post. His eyes followed Anna, unreadable but intent. Tom slowed. "That you're doing, keeping them from taking her without me." The young man didn't answer in English, just gave the faintest nod before closing his eyes again. Tom and Anna stepped back into the lodge. The fire was still burning low. She sank onto the furs, exhaustion settling over her. Tom sat beside her, staring into the flames. "You think they'll make the next one harder?" she asked. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "But you'll be ready." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the lodge walls. Somewhere in the camp, a drum began again, slower this time, more deliberate. Tom knew it meant they were already preparing for whatever came next. Dawn came with a sky the color of hammered steel and a wind that cut straight through wool and hide. Tom was already awake, feeding more wood to the small fire, when the interpreter's shadow filled the doorway. "It's time," he said, just as he had the morning before. Anna stirred under her blanket, blinking at the cold air that rushed in. She pulled it tighter around herself as she sat up. "What's the trial today?" she asked. The interpreter's eyes moved from her to Tom before answering. "The trial of courage. She must cross the sky bridge and bring back what is on the other side." Tom frowned. "Sky bridge." The man gave a short nod toward the ridge that loomed to the north. "A rope bridge. Old. The canyon beneath is deep." Anna swallowed, but her chin lifted. "What's on the other side?" The interpreter didn't answer directly. "A pouch. Medicine for the wounded. You will know it when you see it." Tom stood. "She's just a child. She is the one who gave the blanket." The interpreter replied, his tone firm. "The courage must be hers." Minutes later, they were walking through the camp toward the ridge, Elon and several warriors leading the way. The wounded Apache youth was there too, supported between two others, his gaze never leaving Anna. The trail up the ridge was steep and narrow, the snow packed hard by years of use. When they reached the top, Tom's breath caught. The sky bridge stretched across a black canyon, its ropes swaying in the wind, its planks worn and uneven. The drop below seemed endless, the river at the bottom a silver thread far away. Anna stepped forward, her boots crunching on the icy ground. Tom caught her arm. "You don't have to do this, Annie." She looked up at him. "If I don't, they won't let us go home." "I can do it, Pa." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she gripped the rope railing. The interpreter handed her a small torch. "For light. The wind will make it tricky." The warrior stood silent as she stepped onto the first plank. The bridge groaned under her weight, the wind pushing at her like invisible hands. Tom's heart pounded with each step she took, the rope swaying harder the farther she went. Halfway across, the wind howled through the canyon, and one of the planks beneath her boots cracked. She froze, clutching the rope railing tight. "Don't look down," Tom shouted. "Keep moving." Anna shut her eyes for a moment, drew a breath, and stepped past the broken plank. Slowly, plank by plank, she made her way to the far side. When she reached the other end, a small shelter stood just beyond the bridge. She ducked inside, emerging moments later with a leather pouch tied to her belt. The return trip was worse. The wind had picked up, snapping the ropes and rattling the planks. Twice she had to crouch low, clinging to the sides until the gusts passed. Tom's throat felt tight the whole time. When her boots finally hit solid ground again, he pulled her into his arms, the relief almost knocking the breath out of him. Ellen stepped forward, touching the pouch at her side. He spoke in low tones, and the interpreter translated. "The second trial is past. You have shown courage." Anna straightened, though her cheeks were flushed from the cold. "I just kept thinking about Ma," she said to Tom. "How she'd tell me to keep going, no matter how scared I was." The warriors led them back toward camp, the pouch carried now by the wounded youth. He glanced at Anna and gave her a slow nod of acknowledgement, one she returned without words. Back in the camp, the fires burned brighter against the encroaching dusk. The medicine was taken into a large shelter near the center, the chanting of women inside carrying on the wind. Tom guided Anna back to their lodge, but before they stepped inside, the interpreter paused. The final trial will be tomorrow. It will be the most difficult. What is it? Tom asked. The man's eyes lingered on Anna for a long moment before he answered. The trial of sacrifice. She must give what she values most. Anna's fingers tightened on her blanket, the frayed edges brushing the snow. The night before the final trial, sleep didn't come easily. Tom lay on the furs, staring at the faint glow of the fire, listening to the quiet rhythm of Anna's breathing beside him. Every so often, the wind rattled the lodge walls, and he'd think of the interpreter's words, "She must give what she values most." He already knew what that meant. He'd seen the way Anna clutched her mother's blanket, even when she worked or slept. It was more than just warmth to her. It was a piece of the woman they'd lost, the only thing left that still carried her scent, faint but lingering. In the dark, he whispered, "Anna." She stirred. You don't have to do it," he said. "If it's the blanket, there has to be another way." Her voice was soft but certain. Ma always told me, doing the right thing isn't about what's easy. It's about what you're willing to give up for someone else. Tom closed his eyes. "I just don't want them taking it from you." "They won't take Ma from me," Anna murmured. "Not really." Before he could answer, the first drumbeat rolled across the camp slow and deep, calling them to the central fire. The morning sky was heavy with low clouds, the air sharp with the promise of snow. Warriors and elders gathered in a wide circle. At the center, Elan stood beside the interpreter, a low wooden platform at his feet. Anna walked forward with the blanket draped over her shoulders. Her steps were steady, but Tom could see the way her fingers tightened around the fabric's edges. The interpreter raised his voice. "The trial of sacrifice is the last. To seal the bond made when you gave life to one of ours, you must now give what is most precious to you. Once given, it will belong to the people forever." Anna's gaze moved over the crowd until it landed on the wounded Apache youth. He was standing now, leaning on a carved staff, his eyes locked on hers. She took a deep breath, then stepped onto the platform. Slowly, she pulled the blanket from her shoulders. The air seemed to still the colors of the worn fabric catching the light from the fire. Tom felt his throat tighten. That blanket had been wrapped around Anna the day her mother was buried. It had been with her through every winter, every night, when the wind howled outside the ranch. Anna held it for a moment longer, her thumb brushing the frayed edge before she turned to Elan. "This belonged to my mother," she said, her voice clear. "She's gone, but she taught me to help someone when they need it most. This blanket saved your warrior's life. If giving it means the debt is paid, then it's yours." She held it out. Ellen accepted it without a word, folding it carefully before placing it in the arms of the young man they'd rescued. The youth's expression softened. He stepped forward, speaking in Apache. The interpreter translated. "He says he will carry it always to remember the one who gave him her warmth when he had nothing left." Anna gave him a small nod, her eyes glistening. Ellen raised his hands to quiet the murmurs around the circle. "The third trial is past, the bond is honored, and the debt is paid. The girl and her father may return to their home." Tom exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing for the first time in days. But before he could step forward to take Anna's hand, Ellen spoke again, his voice low and serious. The interpreter hesitated before translating. "But there is one more choice," he said. "You may leave now or stay until the snow melts as guests of the tribe to learn our ways." Anna glanced at her father, surprise flickering in her eyes. Tom studied her for a moment, then looked to the young man holding the blanket. Something unspoken passed between them, a quiet understanding born not of words, but of what they had survived together. The cold wind swept through the clearing, carrying with it the faint scent of wood smoke and pine. Tom knew the decision would have to be made now, with the eyes of the whole tribe watching. Tom's eyes stayed on Anna, reading her face the way he used to when she was little and unsure about a choice. She didn't look scared, just thoughtful, caught between the pull of home and the strange bond that had formed here. The young warrior still held her mother's blanket, the frayed edge resting against his arm. His dark eyes never left hers, and in them was something Tom recognized: gratitude, and maybe the beginning of respect. Ellen waited silent, his hands folded before him. The camp seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Anna looked up at her father. "What do you think, Pa?" she asked. Tom took in the snow-laden trees, the smell of smoke, the quiet order of the people around them. "I think," he said slowly, "that going home means safety. But staying might teach us something we can't learn anywhere else." Her gaze shifted back to the young man. "He almost died, Pa. If it wasn't for us, he wouldn't be standing there. And now, I want to know more about who he is, about all of them." Tom's jaw tightened. "It's not an easy life here. You've seen the cold. You've seen the work." Anna's voice didn't waver. "I've seen worse when we were alone." There was no defiance in her tone, just truth. Tom nodded once, then turned to the interpreter. "Tell Elan we'll stay until the snow melts." The words rippled through the crowd, soft murmurs spreading. Elan inclined his head in acceptance. "Then you will live as we live," the interpreter said. "You will work, eat, and share in our ways." From that day, the rhythm of their lives changed. Tom rose before dawn with the men hauling wood and cutting meat for drying racks. Anna worked alongside the women, learning to grind corn between flat stones, her small hands red from the cold. The young warrior, whose name they learned was Keone, visited often. At first he spoke little, his English halting, but slowly Anna began to pick up words in Apache, and their conversations grew. One evening, while the snow fell thick and silent, Tom found her near the fire listening as Keone told a story. She laughed at something he said, the sound bright against the hush of winter. Tom didn't interrupt, just watched, thinking how strange it was that a few days ago they'd been strangers, and now his daughter's smile came easier in this camp than it had in months. But the peace didn't last. It began with a scout's arrival one brittle morning. He rode hard into camp, speaking quickly to Elan. The interpreter's face tightened as he translated for Tom. "Soldiers are moving this way. A patrol of 12. They've been following tracks in the snow." Tom felt the old knot of tension return. "They're not here for us, are they?" "They may be," the interpreter said. "Or for Keone. He escaped from them after they took him prisoner." Anna overheard, her eyes wide. "If they take him back," Tom cut in, his voice low, "then we won't let that happen." By nightfall, the air in camp was taut. Warriors checked their bows and rifles. Fires burned low, and the elders spoke in quiet tones. Tom helped reinforce the outer line of shelters, the cold biting his fingers until they went numb. As he worked, he caught Keone's eye. The young man gave a short nod, gratitude again, but also something heavier, a readiness for whatever was coming. The snow kept falling, muffling sound, wrapping the camp in a deceptive calm. But Tom knew it was the kind of calm that broke fast, and when it did, it would take more than courage to keep them alive. The night pressed down heavy, the snow still falling in slow, deliberate flakes. Every sound in the camp seemed sharper, boots crunching leather, creaking the muffled thump of hooves somewhere beyond the tree line. Tom stood with Elan and 3 other warriors near the northern edge, his rifle slung over his shoulder, the cold air stinging his lungs. "They'll come at first light," Ellen said through the interpreter. "They always think the morning is their ally." Tom's eyes swept the dark shapes of the trees. "Then we make sure it isn't." Anna was by the central fire with the women hands wrapped around a steaming cup of broth. She watched her father's silhouette at the edge of the camp and felt the same gnawing knot she'd felt the day she found Keone in the snow. This time the danger was coming to them. Keone approached, limping slightly, his blanket, her mother's blanket, around his shoulders. "You're cold," he said in slow English. She shook her head. "I'm scared." He considered that for a moment, then nodded. "Good. Scared makes you careful." The first light was still far off when the sound came, faint but growing, the rhythmic crunch of many boots over snow. The warriors melted into the tree-line, rifles and bows ready. Tom crouched behind a fallen log, Anna hidden further back with one of the older women. Through the dim gray of dawn, figures emerged, 12 soldiers in blue coats, rifles at the ready. Their leader, a stocky man with a thick mustache, called out, "We're here for the prisoner. Hand him over and no one gets hurt." Tom exchanged a glance with Elan. The interpreter stepped forward, voice steady. "There is no prisoner here." The mustached officer snorted. "We tracked his blood and footprints to this camp. You're harboring an escaped Apache killer." Anna's fists clenched around the hem of her coat. Keone didn't move from his place by the fire. His face calm, but his eyes sharp. "You'll have to go through me to take him," Tom said, stepping into view. The officer's lip curled. You're no part of this. Move aside before you get. Tom's voice was flat. Not gonna happen. The air tightened like a drawn bowstring. One of the soldiers shifted his rifle, and the movement was all it took. 3 warriors stepped from cover, bows drawn arrows aimed at the patrol. Last warning, Elon said through the interpreter. The mustached officer's eyes narrowed. You're making a mistake. The standoff stretched breath misting in the cold fingers tightening on triggers and bowstrings. Then from somewhere behind the soldiers, a voice called out, sharp and urgent. Another man in uniform appeared younger, his face pale. He looked from Tom to Keone and back again. Hold your fire, he shouted to his men. The officer turned, scowling. What are you doing, Lieutenant? The younger man hesitated, then stepped forward. That Apache saved my life once, 2 winters ago near the Cimarron. I won't see him dragged back in chains. The silence that followed was thick enough to taste. Tom's pulse pounded in his ears. The officer's glare moved between his lieutenant and the camp. This isn't over, he growled finally. We'll be back. The soldiers withdrew their shapes, fading into the trees until the sound of boots on snow was gone. Only then did the camp exhale. Anna rushed to her father, clutching his arm. They'll come again, she said. I know, Tom replied, looking toward Elon. And next time we'd better be ready. The camp moved like a living thing after the soldiers disappeared into the trees. Men checked rifles, women gathered what they could carry in case the warriors decided to move before nightfall. The snow had stopped, but the cold had sharpened the kind that stung the inside of your nose with every breath. Tom stayed near Elon, helping to shift barrels of grain into a fortified shelter near the center of camp. They'll be back, Tom said quietly. Ellen nodded. Yes, and they will bring more men. Keone approached, still wrapped in Anna's old blanket. His limp was less pronounced now, though the wound still slowed him. We fight, he asked in careful English. Ellen answered him in Apache, the words short and clipped. The interpreter turned to Tom. He says fighting is the last choice, but if they come with chains, then we fight. Anna hovered close, her eyes scanning the tree line. Pa, can't we just leave before they get here? Tom shook his head. Running now would mean leaving them to face it alone. You know I can't do that. The day passed with tense preparation. Tom joined 2 younger warriors in setting hidden lines, snares, and tripwires along the narrow path to the ridge. Anna helped the women smear ash over the snow to dull the brightness of the campfires, making the settlement harder to see from a distance. That evening, as the light drained from the sky, Tom sat by the fire, sharpening his knife. Keone sat across from him, watching. You are not like most white men, Keone said slowly. Tom kept working the blade. Maybe I'm just too stubborn to pick a side without seeing the whole truth. Keone gave a faint smile. Truth is hard to see when men come with guns. Anna listened, her chin resting on her knees. What will you do if they come tomorrow? Keone's smile faded. If they come for me, I will not be taken again. The night stretched long. Tom slept in his boots, his rifle propped within arm's reach. Sometime past midnight, the low call of a scout reached the camp, a signal. Everyone was awake instantly. Warriors moved to their posts, women gathered the children into the central lodge. Tom slipped out with Elon, crouching near the outer line. Through the moonlight, he saw movement, a shadow slipping between trees, then another. But these weren't soldiers. 3 figures emerged into the open, hands raised. They were wrapped in army blankets, faces hollow with exhaustion. The interpreter whispered, They are scouts from another band. They say the soldiers have camped 5 miles away. They are waiting for reinforcements. Tom exhaled slowly. That meant they had maybe a day 2 at most before the fight came to their doorstep. Back at the fire, Anna waited, her eyes searching her father's face. What did they say? They're coming, Tom told her, and this time they'll be ready for us. The wind picked up, rattling the lodge walls. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf's howl carried over the snow, long and low. It felt like a warning neither of them could ignore. By dawn, the camp was already awake, moving with the silent urgency of people who knew time was running out. Smoke rose in thin, controlled columns from the cooking fires, careful not to give away their position to watching eyes. Tom stood at the ridge with Elon scanning the valley below. The snow was unbroken in most places, but here and there faint tracks marked where scouts had passed during the night. They'll strike tomorrow, Elan said through the interpreter. Before the next storm. Soldiers don't like to fight in deep snow. Tom nodded. Then tonight is our last chance to set the ground in our favor. They returned to camp where warriors worked in small groups, weaving branches into barriers and hiding pits beneath loose snow. Tom helped reinforce the main lodge walls with logs, remembering the way wind could drive snow hard enough to split wood. Anna moved between tasks, carrying water, helping the women grind meal, and gathering strips of dried meat. Keone found her near the central fire. "You should stay in the big lodge when they come," he said, his English slow but steady. She looked up from her work. "And let everyone else do the fighting?" "No." His brow furrowed. "It will be dangerous." "I've been in danger before," she replied. "And besides, you still have my blanket. You think I'd let you stand out there alone with it?" Keone almost smiled, but the tension in his shoulders stayed. "You talk like a warrior. Maybe I'm learning from one," she said. By midday, the preparations were nearly complete. The interpreter came to Tom with news from the scouts. "The soldiers have split into two groups. One will approach from the ridge. The other will try to circle from the river." Tom frowned. "They're trying to box you in." "That is why we fight on our ground," Ilan said. The sun dipped low, staining the snow in long orange shadows. The camp grew quiet except for the muted crackle of fires. Tom checked his rifle for the third time, the familiar weight of it both comforting and sobering. Anna sat with him, her small hands wrapped around a tin cup of broth. "Pa." "Yeah. Do you think we can win?" He looked into the fire, then at her. "I think winning means getting through it alive, and I'm going to make sure you do." Night fell heavy. The stars shone cold and sharp, the air so still Tom could hear the faint groan of trees shifting under frost. Scouts slipped in and out of camp, reporting movements in the distance. Sometime past midnight, a low whistle cut through the stillness. Warriors rose without a word, slipping to their positions. Tom crouched behind the log barrier near the ridge, Anna beside the women in the central lodge, just as they'd agreed. Through the darkness, shapes emerged at the tree line, silent, careful rifles catching the faint glint of moonlight. Tom's heart pounded as he counted them. Too many. A shout rang out from the far side near the river. The second group had arrived earlier than expected. The camp was surrounded. Elan's voice cut through the cold. "Hold until they commit." The first shot cracked the night wide open.